What makes our programming is our interpretation of things. Well,
Okay.
why that becomes so chaotic for us is as a child, you develop your imagination first. So that's why
Uh-huh.
it's perfectly normal to have an invisible friend because you don't have any reasoning and logic that tells you that that's silly.
Welcome to another episode of talking about the framework God's way. And today, again, we have Bruce. Really excited to hear about our belief system and what that all means, and for you to explain that to us. And so, hey, let's just jump right in. And in light of the framework, how does your beliefs and the belief system work?
Well, it's quite fascinating, actually.
That's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, because most people don't understand the role of beliefs.
Huh?
And I always use the analogy of a computer because most people get a computer runs on a program, and whatever the program is dictates what the computer will do in any given situation. Well, we're essentially the same way, and our beliefs is that programming. So ultimately, why we do the things we do, why we feel, why we think the way we do is really all
Uh huh.
predicated on our belief system. And it gets said a lot of different ways,
Huh?
but I like the way that I talk about it because there's a lot of techniques out there to discover what's limiting you, whether it's your thought life or different
Uh
things to
huh.
where, you don't feel you're loved, you don't feel you're worthy or something. And that makes you feel a certain way. And so most
Yeah.
people will think about how they feel and their thoughts at times. And maybe they're going to I'm going to think positively. So,
Right.
they only want to think positive thoughts and all those things. And that's great. And, but the problem is if that's not in harmony with your belief system, you're now in conflict. So technically, you don't even believe, let's say you're using a positive affirmation. You don't essentially even technically, it's not true in your programming. And because we operate based on our programming, it might feel good to say. And technically, if you use a positive affirmation long enough,
Right. It programs us, right?
at a certain point, it can reprogram you. But certainly that's going to take, probably a month, plus or minus if you're doing it multiple times a day, because there's also
Exactly.
positive reinforcement that it's not true too. So it's a very inefficient way. It's all based on willpower to keep saying it, keep saying it, keep saying it.
Mhm.
And so what I've tried to do is create a process to where you no longer have to do it for a month straight because maybe we should explain how programming happens.
Yeah. Let's do that.
So, certainly, you're born with certain things that affect our programming. So,
Right.
heredity and different things passed down from the parents. If
Uh-huh.
when they talk in the Bible about curses going to the third and fourth generation, those are things that
Right.
can be passed on. Positive
Right.
things can be passed on too, though. And so, there is some things we get at birth, from our parents. But
Mhm.
predominantly the way our programming happens is we're a blank slate when we're born.
Okay.
And how programming typically, I've heard them say, the experts, that most like 85-90% of our programming is done by the age of around 6 or so.
Mhm. Mhm.
Since what makes our programming is our interpretation of things. Well, why that becomes so chaotic for us is as a child, you develop your imagination first. So that's
Uh-huh.
why it's perfectly normal to have an invisible friend because you don't have any reasoning and logic that tells you that that's silly.
Mhm.
And that's why most adults don't have invisible friends anymore because now they develop their logic and reasoning.
Right. But
So if logic
the
and
kid, a
reasoning,
kid's developing.
what's that?
No, a kid's developing their cognitive ability, and so that's why they have those friends, and then they kind of grow out of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's one example, right, of
Right.
imagination without reasoning.
Okay.
And so the thing of it is if now we have an imagination with no bumpers around it, we can interpret an event to mean literally anything. And and sometimes that could be a positive thing that we put into our programming. Sometimes it's not, and so it's a real mixed bag.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of it's your upbringing. You know, if you're in a very chaotic upbringing that's
Yeah.
negative all the time, more of your programming will be sort of not ideal, not beneficial than in the situations like that. If you had great environments and very loving parents, you have a lot better
Uh-huh.
chance of having positive things in your programming, but you're gonna get a mix of both.
Right.
So and it's not really no parent can do it perfectly because the problem is you can tell your kid you love them 1,000 times,
Mhm.
but because it's about his interpretation of things, not about reality, he can
Right.
interpret things to mean anything. So, and it might not have anything to do with your parents at all. It could be, some neighbor kid yells at you when you thought you were doing a good deed. And so now the lie in your programming is, oh, if I try and help people, they're going to hurt me or they're going to
Mm.
make me sad or whatever. So literally, you'll kind of, try and stay away from those situations that make you sad. Generally we just go on and once the programming's there, it doesn't leave typically. It stays the same for our whole life unless we choose to change it. There are some things sometimes where we'll have epiphanies that, oh, and that can change our programming. But generally, the programming just doesn't change that much. And it more happens by accident than on purpose. And there's multiple techniques out there now on how to reprogram ourselves.
Uh-huh.
And I'm a fan of positive affirmations. It's just not a very efficient way to move forward, but I still think it's good. And here's something that's very helpful too. So let's say you have a program that says you're worthy as a person, just who you are as
Okay.
a personality. Well, what comes from programming is your thoughts and your feelings come from that. So some people will say if you think a certain way, you'll become a certain way.
Uh-huh.
That's semi-true. It's really based, more on your what's in your programming, and so,
Yeah.
again,
Then.
positive thinking is more kind of the hard way to change things. So, it's kinda if you walk it out, it goes beliefs create thoughts and feelings, which can
Okay.
create emotions, which also then create outcomes in our life, and so, essentially, our programming is really our beliefs. Now
Okay.
our belief could be true, they could be false, they could be positive, they can be negative for us. And when I talk about truth, I base it on is it true to God?
Uh-huh.
So that's sort of my line for what's true and what's not true. If
Of
God says
course.
I'm worthy just because it's an unalienable right,
Right.
well, then if anything has to do with unworthiness, it's a lie.
Uh,
So we have a lot of lies in our programming that
yeah.
ideally we can take and we want to get out of our programming. And
Yeah.
because what I discovered is that every belief has a magnetic charge to it.
Right. That's what you talk about.
So what you believe, whether it's the truth or a lie, it still operates the same way where whatever you believe, you draw it into your life.
Mm. So
And
positive or negative.
yeah, and the problem is it reinforces that it's true, right?
Right. Wait,
And
but you say but you say your beliefs also drive your thoughts and your feelings, and so thoughts and feelings also have that concurrent positive or negative charge, magnetic charge?
oh, yeah. Well, I don't know that I would associate it actually to the thought and feeling. I would just associate it to
Just
the
to
feeling.
the beliefs. And
But
then out of
mm,
that go
but
ahead.
but definitely your thoughts and feelings are gonna reinforce whatever the belief is, of course, because
Okay,
that's what it
okay,
flows from.
okay.
The sort of the positive and negative of the magnetic charge of the belief is if it's not good for you, unfortunately, you're going to keep drawing it into your life.
Yeah.
And so let's use an example. Let's say you're a lady and you think all men are pigs, and you go to a football game of 50,000 people
Yeah.
and you sit down in the section, wherever your section is, and inevitably you'll more than likely within around you, there'll be one of those guys. And you're like, because you're drawing it into your life. So like I had a
Mm,
misbelief that I was created to be abused by others.
okay.
Well,
Growing
that's
up, you had that.
not the belief you want, let me tell you,
Right. Right.
because I was constantly being abused by people.
Mm,
Now, the exciting part of that is if you change the belief and you get something positive in its place, and once
yeah.
that enters your programming, now that's how you operate. And you don't have to use fourth
That's
effort for things to change because now you have a new magnetic charge.
yeah. 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 And so what belief switched for you? And so instead of created to be abused by others, what was the belief that came in to take that
Let's
place?
see, I don't know if I remember that one specifically. So maybe, yeah, I'm not
But
quite sure.
it could be to bless others or
Well, what I do, so once I discover the misbelief,
okay. Yeah.
I have a prayer where I give that misbelief to God. And then I ask him for his truth. Because see, what you're doing is once you take
Mm,
that belief out of your programming, you're creating a void.
right. So that's why I was asking, yeah, how do you feel that?
Yeah, and the problem with the void is there are no voids in our programming, so something's gonna fill it. So you wanna fill it with something that's
Positive.
true, that's
Yeah.
positive. So
Okay.
there's 3 things you can essentially do, I would say, to fill in that void. So
Uh-huh.
let's say you discovered the lie, you give it to God. If you can hear God's voice, you can ask him what the truth is, and whatever he says, that's what you put. And
Uh-huh.
so the second half to prayer is where I say I choose to believe whatever God told me.
Uh-huh.
And then the second way is you can ascertain the truth out of the Bible and put that in the void.
Uh-huh.
And then if let's say you don't hear God's voice, you're not really finding something that seems to click in the Bible, then that's when you would use a positive affirmation.
Okay.
'Cause
Okay.
it might be not exactly in alignment with God's truth, but it's positive still, so you're gonna get a positive
Right.
result from your programming, and so it's and that's how you change the magnetic charge.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I probably should have had, the prayer so we coulda gave it to people right now.
Oh, we can add that a little later.
Okay.
Is so then can you explain what it looks like if you have a positive belief and how that magnetic charge of a positive belief impacts then your thoughts or your feelings and then your outcomes? So can you give
Well, 'cause
me a positive example?
yeah, sure. So, I mean, first of all, if it's a positive belief, you're gonna get positive thoughts and positive feelings that come from it. So, of
Right.
course, those are healthy, and we like them, and generally, that will also cause people to respond in a positive way to us. So,
Uh-huh.
how most people control their life so they can be happy is by controlling everything around them on the outside of them. Like, if I'm
Yeah.
around people that treat me good, I'm gonna be happy.
Right.
If I reach my goals, I'll be happy.
Right. It's all
And those
conditional.
things do make us happy, but it's temporary.
Okay.
God offers it when God's our source of that, well, then we're always there, right?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't take anything to be happy if God's your source of happiness. It's just something that naturally flows from God to us at all times, 24/7.
Uh-huh.
So it's more now something inside of us, right? And so, but as far as now, okay, you have this positive belief. So this one to me was an eye opener. So it was when I was, with everything I do, I experiment a lot to see if there's consistency and can other people do it and get that consistency too.
Mhm.
So I had discovered, the one lie I told you about. I was created to be abused by others.
Yes.
And I also had realized people were my source for love, not God. I changed those
Okay.
two things. And I had a guy I'd started a business with, and I invested some money.
Okay.
And then character issues showed up, and I realized I couldn't be partners with him. And I said, "Hey, I can't be in business with you." We really hadn't even got going yet. It showed up very early, which was good.
That's a
And
good
he goes,
sign. Yeah.
"Okay, but I'm not giving the money back." I'm like, "Legally, you didn't have to, but ethically, you should have."
Yeah.
And so that had happened, like, say, 2 years before I discovered these 2 things. A
Okay.
couple weeks later, after I changed on my beliefs, all of a sudden, he's like, "Well, Bruce, if you want me to pay you back, I will." I didn't call that guy. I hadn't talked to that guy, but all of a sudden, he just started making it right.
Because
And now
and that magnetic charge, like, there was a
yeah,
pull to that.
yeah, because see, now I've eliminated drawing in, so now the very person that abused me financially
Yeah.
now is making it right because that magnetic charge to abuse me is gone and now it's
Yeah.
positive. So now I start getting a positive result from him. And that happened with another guy. And all within the couple weeks of that, because when your magnetic charge reorients itself,
Yeah.
people respond to the magnetic charge. They
Yeah. They
they do
have
it.
to.
It's kind of unconscious. They're not aware of it.
Uh
But
huh.
everybody's beliefs are technically, how's the word to say it? They're a public views, a subconscious level or a super conscious, however you would say it. So people tend to feel it and they tend to act upon it and they don't really even necessarily know that's what's causing them to act that way. And so the beauty is now if I have something in my life, I see patterns I don't like, I'm immediately to, okay, what
What's
misbelief has drawn it into my
Yeah.
life? I
Yeah.
discover that so you can track it back, right? People using me financially. Okay, what's the lie that's creating that? Change that. And now I don't have to put forth effort to keep people from abusing me. As soon as
Yeah.
I change the lie, and it might be more than one, all of a sudden they
Yeah.
just stop.
Yeah. The way that you think through it is very counterintuitive because if that were to happen to me, I would want to control or change the other people, right?
Yeah, of
Naturally and
course.
like intuitively is like, okay, I need to stop that person. I need to stop all of these things from happening to me. As opposed to God's way and the way that you're talking about it is there there's something in my programming. And it's always easier to, well, it's all, you can only change yourself. You can't really change other people, right? But if you can change that positive charge to your beliefs, then that's what you're going to draw in. And I really like that concept because like, yeah, I just want to change people and protect myself, but I don't want to change me. But that's in essence what you're saying. Like, to take a look at who you are and your programming and like that's what you change and then all of the other stuff will fall in line. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Which in some ways feels irritating that you have to change. So I'm the
Exactly.
perpetrators kind of, but
Right.
the beauty of it also puts you in control now. Where to me, it's
Uh-huh.
so exciting because I realize, okay, what do I need to
Yeah.
adjust? And
Right.
I won't have to worry about this anymore. Now, that doesn't mean you
Yes,
shouldn't protect yourself in certain situations,
of
if
course.
it's physical or if you need to go to court or whatever. You
Yeah,
gotta,
be
okay, it
prepared.
might take time to change the belief, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So
No, I like that.
we all see people that are ripe for abuse. They're just always being abused by others.
Yeah,
I guarantee you that's just a programming issue.
and it's what they're attracting and drawing into their lives.
Yeah.
Wow. Wait, what's the process like for you to see it? Or you just have learned how to see the patterns in your life and how other people behave? and then you turn inward. So that's what you do?
Yeah. So that's my process. So because patterns aren't like random, they're not,
Right.
they're really all based on something and they're all very consistent. So a
Yeah.
one-off, doesn't mean anything to me, but if I start seeing two, three, four times or something, that's a pattern then, right?
You pay attention. So you start
So
looking for those, or
then you take the time to reflect on what are you seeing, and it's like, oh, what's the common theme? I think all men are pigs, or I think I was people are always abusing me financially.
Mhm.
Well, then I go into my prayer time with God, and I'm like, okay, God, help me to see the misbelief. Now, there's multiple techniques for doing this.
Mhm.
And I mean, I wasn't the first person to come up with this necessarily as far as how to heal yourself.
Mhm.
The Healing Code is a book you can read,
Right.
a couple doctors wrote. I like that book because it really does understand the correlation between your physical body and your belief system, and
Okay.
how a lot of disease is really based on these misbeliefs and things that stick to our tissues over time.
Mhm.
And he's got a lot of examples of people healing themselves. So he has a little prayer in there too, towards the back of the book. And I use that, worked really well. He uses positive affirmations. And there's another book, Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. She calls it a script, but it's kind of a prayer you do. Yeah, and that works too. One that I've refined over the years, and I don't know if there's any literature out there anymore. It's called theoplastic healing. And it's
Yeah.
essentially where you go into prayer and you ask the Holy Spirit to guide you back to the event that where the lie entered into your programming. And it's pretty
Mhm.
fascinating because for me, when I first was doing it, I had to have a guide to help me do it. So you don't get,
Okay.
because you go from memory to memory to memory and you're usually getting younger. And so they call it following the smoke back to the fire. And so you're doing it with the Holy Spirit. It's kind of like you're watching the movie. And for me, it was always cartoons and, and sometimes, there was definitely words too, but I'd go from memory to memory and, it usually take an hour and a half or so, and I'd get back to the fire, which was the event that allowed the programming to happen. So
Okay.
in Theoplastic, it's all about God. God's role is to heal you to where your programming is only based on the truth. And Satan's goal is to implant as many lies as he can in your program to keep you away from God, if nothing else, weak for God. And he hates us. So he's trying to basically torture us. And it's really brilliant because once he implants a lie, it's there for the rest of our life. And he doesn't put any effort towards it at all.
Until you
So,
go in and reprogram that lie.
right. And so I can tell you about one of mine. It was quite a trip, really, but
Yeah.
so I followed the fire back. And I came to, I think I was probably 7 years old. And I was out fishing with my dad. He was a commercial fisherman. And we reef netted, which reef netting is like two stationary platforms with a net in between. And you're in a tower looking down and you see the fish come in over the net. You pull the net up around them. And it's literally what the Indians used to do on a reef where it was shallow water. They would stand and let the fish go in between them and pull the net up real quick before they
Yeah.
got away.
Yeah.
And so I'm on one boat, my dad's on the other, and fishing's really slow that day. I'm 7. I have nothing to do for 13 hours. At about hour 8, I'm losing my mind. I'm like,
Right.
I am
Because 'Cause you're waiting.
desperate for anything to happen. Well, I find a metal nut, for a bolt and this plastic ribbon. And I tie the ribbon to the bolt and I throw it in the water and it slowly sinks, and it's like, that's how desperate I was. And well, that as it was sinking, it went behind the net where my dad was looking and he saw it. And he's like, hey, what's that? Did you throw that in the water? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, well, don't do that. You're going to scare the fish. Well, at this time in my life, my dad had been 100% consistent in my mind. If I did something wrong, I got spanked. So now I'm all stressed out because I know he's gonna come over and spank me, and of course I didn't like that much, right?
Even though you're in a different boat.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm only 50 feet away, right? So, and he's got a little skip to bring around to me. He could be there in 30 seconds. Well, I keep waiting, and I'm all like freaked out and I'm waiting and he never comes over. And I'm like, oh, well, I got bored again. So I did it again and I got in trouble again, but he still didn't come over. And the second time I wasn't afraid anymore. And so now this is what it looked like in my mind as I followed the Holy Spirit back to that event.
Mm, mm,
So I throw it into the water and I get in trouble. And as I'm waiting there trembling, waiting for my dad to come and spank me, now this is a cartoon again. So I see Satan come up beside me, the devil, and he's got pointy ears. He's red. He's got a tail and flippers for feet. So it's just a
mhm.
plain cartoon, right? But he comes
Yeah,
up beside me. He goes, see, Bruce, you really can do what you want and get away with it. That was him implanting that lie in me, right?
yeah.
And that lie got me in so much trouble. It made me stubborn and obstinate because I wanted to do what I wanted
Like,
to do.
in the years after that is
Yeah,
what you're saying.
that I didn't get rid of that until I was in my 40s. So for that whole
Shoot.
time now I got smarter about it as I got older, but I got in so
Sure.
much trouble as a kid because when I wasn't supposed to do it, well, that meant it's gonna be fun, so I'm definitely gonna do it. But of course, then I'd get in trouble and I'd have consequences,
Right.
but it never stopped me, right? Because I can get away with it. And most of the time I did get
Wow.
away with it.
Yeah.
So it really created a lot of damage in my life.
Yeah.
So of course you change the lie now, and now I don't live that way anymore.
Yeah. But that is not easy work to follow the smoke back to the fire. Like you said you probably needed a guide and on the front end. And I've read books about how you can do that. And that's not easy for me. Like it takes a lot of work for me to like find myself in that situation. Like that's not easy work, especially to go back like 30
Yeah, I
plus
mean
years.
it's I would say it's true in the beginning. So in the
Okay.
beginning for
And
me,
then
it
you
took
get
about
better.
2 hours with the guide helping me stay on track because sometimes we think the memories should like connect to each other
Uh-huh.
and they just don't. They're just completely
Right.
random. So
Right.
then I'm thinking this, and then the guide's like, yeah, he's done it enough. He's like, that doesn't really sound right.
Yeah.
It's not a
Yeah.
big science, but it was really helpful. Well, I can do
Yeah.
that now in about 15 minutes by myself.
Wow. And then you can feel all of the things because that's the thing that's difficult for me when I try the exercise to imagine back. I follow the smoke back to the fire, but like I don't necessarily feel all of the things that I think I felt when I was in that situation. So for me,
That's
that's
okay.
that's what's hard.
Well, but you don't need to. So
Okay.
I really did in these situations experience the way I felt back then. I felt the
Uh-huh.
trembling, waiting for my dad. I felt all that. It was like I was
Yeah.
literally in that moment, kind of, even though I knew I wasn't.
Right. Right.
Well, when I do it in 15 minutes now, I don't really have much of a emotional response to it at all. And I don't
Yeah.
even
You
go
just.
back to the fire necessarily when the lie was implanted. I
Mhm.
just intuitively been able to figure out how to get to the lie. And I don't worry about all the accessory stuff of how I felt and what was the
Okay.
moment that I believed it because
Okay.
what's most important is you get the lie.
Yeah. To figure out the pattern.
When you first start, most people will be like, "Oh, I think this is the lie." And in one sense it is, but it's not the fundamental lie. It's really the branches or the smoke off the lie.
Uh-huh.
So,
Uh-huh.
that's where the guy's like, "No, no, keep going." And I've done this with people for a long time now, helping them. And people are all over the place. Some people are very unconscious about anything going on in their life. They don't see nothing.
Right.
And then some
No, it's
people are
true.
very conscious of it.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's not an intelligence thing at all. It's got nothing
No.
to do with intelligence.
Yeah.
And I've seen people that are complete rookies get there fairly quickly because maybe they've already spent time reflecting about it or something. And, reflecting on things that make you feel a certain way or looking for patterns, that's
Uh-huh.
about noticing, that's about paying attention, it's about reflecting on it once you collect data. You notice the patterns, you start reflecting on them, thinking about them, what could be causing them. Well, most of us aren't very good at that right when we first start.
Yeah.
But I've seen people and I tell people when you're doing this, don't do it in a 15-minute period because your mind doesn't even get quiet in that amount of time. Have at least 2-hour blocks to do this,
Okay.
especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
In little as 4 hours, so 2 times they've tried to reflect, they've gotten like 300, 400% better just between the first time and the second time. It's actually
Yeah.
something that's not that hard. And again, if you're a Christian, you can ask the Holy Spirit to help you
Yeah.
here,
Yeah, I was
and
gonna
that
say that,
speeds it up
yeah.
too, typically, always.
Right. Because
So
he's pretty good.
it's not a perfect science, but if you get to something that you think you have a lie and you give it to God,
Huh?
possibly maybe you're only halfway to the original lie, but even getting rid of it halfway is helpful. It's kind of like cutting a blackberry bush. Oh, it's not there anymore. So you have the benefit of the blackberry bush not being there until so many months later when it grows back again.
Then you can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's short-term benefits even if you don't get all the way.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it's not as a big a deal, so that can still last for quite a long time before it grows back, you might say.
I'm gonna pause because the fire engine went by.
Somebody found the fire, huh?
Yeah. So from here, do we go on? Well, I want to ask one follow-up question, and then can you connect it to cleaning the conduit, or you need to explain something to get there?
Well, we should probably explain that when I say conduit,
Okay.
I'm referring to ourselves.
Okay. Let me ask the one follow-up question. So you've described our beliefs, you've described our programming and the lies in our programming. You've even kind of explained that we can follow the patterns, you know, and if you're Christian, take the Holy Spirit with you to go back. Is there does that does that explain that process, or am I missing something in that process? Because if someone listens to this and they're like, okay, I want to go back and take a look at my programming, like what are the things to keep in mind when someone is trying to go back and trying to find the lies in their programming?
Well, one, you wanna be patient with yourself. It
Okay.
does take time,
Yeah.
and, sometimes you'll get it wrong. It could be helpful to start off with using one of those 2 books
Okay. The healing code
because
and feelings buried alive.
never die, yeah.
Feelings never. Okay.
Feelings
Feelings never
buried
die.
alive never die.
Never die. Okay. I can put those in the show notes and add links to it.
Yeah, because now the book guides you on how to do it, and it gives more detail than I'm giving right here on how it happens, how it affects
Okay.
us.
Yeah. Yeah. But even when you say be patient with yourself, like set aside 2 hours, 4 hours, like not like that's hard for people. That's hard, like I can set aside 2 hours, but 2 hours, man, that takes a lot of discipline in order to but we could build up to that.
Well, you gotta have a reason why.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're
And
just
then
gonna go watch a movie for 2 hours.
exactly. And you spend the 2 hours doing that. Okay.
But
No.
think about this, especially the more crap you have in your programming, it makes you feel lousy, right?
Huh?
Why do we wanna live with that stuff? Well, I mean, what your life could look at as a much freer person to where now you only have these positive feelings. See, now you feel good without putting forth effort.
Oh.
I was good at controlling my world when I was younger. I could
Huh?
control the people around me so they would treat me a certain way. And, sometimes people would go rogue and I'd have to like get them around. And it took an amazing amount of effort. And I was successful, but man, the amount of effort I had to spend on it was exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially the older you get, the more exhausting it is, and pretty soon you just don't give a crap anymore and you just fatigue.
Uh-huh.
You change your belief system and it's done and you operate by that. So you get that positive, your life is just feels incredible. And quite frankly, you'll do better in life too.
Right. Because you're
Without
drawing positive things into your life.
right. I mean, that works for every aspect. It works in relationships, business,
Yeah.
every area of your life.
Yeah.
And I've
No,
lived
I love
both
it.
because I had a lot of bad programming. I mean, a lot.
Uh-huh. Uh,
And, I didn't feel worthy. I mean, I did okay in life, but, it just it wasn't a great way to feel, going through life. And as I peeled myself over the years to where I am now, the difference, I mean, you can't really even explain. You just about have to experience it. But it's kind of like if you start at a one and now you're at 500, so if you just mathematically think, wow, feels a lot better,
yeah, that's a
that's
huge
kind of the way it
difference.
is. Like you can't even
Yeah.
say I feel 10 times better. I probably feel 500 times better.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's healthier because I mean, we could go on for hours talking about how our misbeliefs create aches and
Yeah.
pains and disease in our body.
Illnesses. Yeah. Because that's what you draw in, that
I hardly
magnetic
go to the
charge.
doctor. Yeah, I
Yeah.
hardly go to the doctor because I just realize how to trace ailments back to the root of it. And usually,
Oh,
as long as the ailment isn't too severe, it hasn't been there too long, if you get rid of the root of the tree, the tree dies and goes away, right?
right.
And
Right.
and so, I mean, because of that, I hardly have to go to the doctor.
Yeah. No, that's pretty amazing. I know people hearing that would probably, really gravitate to that. And so this is helpful to know that like you can take a look at your programming and that belief system and maybe even change some of that.
Yeah, let's say you have cancer. My recommendation typically to people is go do whatever you want to do medically to help heal yourself.
Huh?
But don't stop there. The reason cancer comes back fairly commonly every 2 to 5 years is because you use symptoms. I mean, you treated the symptom of cancer, and so the cancer goes away, but the root that's causing it's still there.
Uh,
So, yeah, eating better, getting rid of toxic things in your life can make it harder for the cancer to come back. But if you
uh-huh.
get to the root that was causing it to begin with and you did all these other things, well, then you'll probably never have to deal with the cancer again.
Um,
And that's the one thing I like about the healing code. He really does a fairly decent job of helping you understand how it works physically.
yeah, he makes those connections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Feelings Buried Alive actually has a graph in it that says knee issues typically are these types of issues. And it helps. It's not like a perfect science, but it gets you going, okay, do I have these things going in my life? Because if you're like, wow, what this book says could be creating knee issues, yeah, that's going on in my life. Well, it's a
Yeah.
very good indication that that's what you need to deal with then.
Yeah, at the very least, it gives you a starting point to start working toward the thing, as opposed to just like, not having any kind of direction. No, that's really helpful. How do we move into the conduit and what's the connection there?
Well, I mean, this is just one way to heal yourself. I mean, there's obviously things like getting God as our source will be very
Yes.
healing too.
Yeah.
But if we go there, this thing's another 45 minutes long or something. So maybe it should be another
Okay.
segment.
All right. Yeah, because we're at like 42 minutes right now. And
Yeah.
yeah, there was a lot there. Like, I mean, there was a lot of information there. So maybe
Well,
next time we can
it's
cover the
information that's
conduit.
It's the information is just not out there much. I mean, it's getting more
No,
and more.
yeah, no, the information in this particular episode is what I'm talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a lot. There was a lot there.
Yeah, that's why I like giving it to people because
Yeah.
it opens their eyes to, this is how, things work. Because if you
Yeah.
don't understand once your eyes open up to that, well, now
Mhm.
you can start looking for more information in regards to that.
You have a book coming out where you write about all of this. How does your book align with the 2 books that you mentioned?
Uh, well, the 95-5 principle you're referring to is one of my books. It's more comprehensive. These books are really based around, our beliefs and thoughts and feelings and things, and how it deals with disease, in our
Okay.
body and stuff.
And your
Where,
book is a much more broad.
yeah, mine's more about how to partner with God, how to operate your role more clearly, and how you can
Okay.
have the best life
Yeah.
overall. So
Man.
it's it's more broad.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it, but, like, I know this concept really helps. Well, thank you for taking the time. These are always rich conversations, and I always am learning so much from you, man, and I appreciate it.
Well, I enjoy it,
Yeah.
getting together with you.
Yes, sir, even if we do it this way. Alright.